It's not a matter of if something is going to come up that you need an emergency fund. It's when something will come up, because it's going to happen. And that's why it's so important to have an emergency fund.
Welcome to the Steward Lab Podcast with our parents, James and Amberlee Rich. Join Mom and Dad as they explore how to be good stewards with your time, money, relationships, health, careers, and even your kids, like us. It's all about growing God's kingdom. Come on, let's experiment.
Do you remember a couple of years ago when we had just one thing after another just went wrong? I remember driving to church with the kids by myself, and something was going on with our van, and I didn't know what it was. I gave you a call, and then on my way back, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it. Pulled in, found out that the radiator went out.
Meanwhile, at the house, it started getting warmer inside. It was about this time, I don't know, 2-3 years ago. And our AC in the house started to fail. It was one of those things that's like, oh, what else is going to happen?
It was a time for us where it was just seemed like all these big expenses were coming up. We weren't anticipating them. And we're like, what's next? And this is a time of year when you need AC, and we needed to have a vehicle that we could go and use. We had vacations coming up that we needed to use that vehicle for. It was stressful, and it all happened at once. And I think a lot of times that's what happens to people, is that you get a lot of big expenses that come up, and it feels like it derails you completely. It's stressful. You don't know what to do.
We were kind of scrambling, trying to figure out what we were going to do. We talked even in our last episode about having a sinking fund or a savings bucket for Christmas. Well, up until this time, we had also had sinking funds and savings buckets for our car fund and for our home renovation or home maintenance fund. And the unfortunate thing in this case was that we did not have enough in both of those to cover both of these. So we pretty much completely drained those accounts. But that was our first line of defense in terms of something crazy happening like this. And so Amberlee, what did we end up doing?
So we used our home repair and home maintenance fund. We also used all of our car maintenance and car repair fund.
Yeah.
We used all of that. And then we needed to tap into our emergency fund.
Within 2 hours, we had to write $10,000 worth of checks between fixing the vehicle and paying for a new air conditioner and furnace combination.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing, like the AC went out, and then they're like, well, you need to also update your furnace. And so it just ended up being a bigger and bigger expense than what we originally thought it would be.
Most ACs, they were telling us, last between 15 and 20 years. We were like at 18 years. And they said you could fix just the AC and it would be cheaper now, but once you get to 2 or 3 years down the road, your furnace is likely to fail as well, and then it will be more expensive to fix them separately than together. So we decided to go ahead and fix them together, and so it was a $10,000 hit all in one fell swoop. Now, we did not have enough money in our savings buckets to cover these. So what did we do?
We used our emergency fund to cover the rest of it. And that did give us peace of mind that even though we had these two big expenses come up in a matter of days, we still were able to pay for everything as usual. We had money set aside that we didn't have to rely on a credit card or to go into debt for it.
Yeah. In our marriage, we haven't had to tap into our emergency fund very often. And the reason for that is not because we don't have emergencies, not because unforeseen things don't come up in our life. It's because we've implemented a two-part defense strategy in our life. And the first part is simply putting into place sinking funds or savings buckets. We'll get into an episode about savings buckets a little bit more, but simply put, you figure out, okay, on average, how much am I going to need to be spending for car repairs? How much am I going to need for Christmas? Those types of things. And then we set that up as a monthly payment to ourselves into a small account that would grow and grow and grow. That's the first line of defense of something happening in our finances that we tap into first. And then if that doesn't cover it and we don't have other places that we can pull from, only then do we kind of look at the emergency fund as to whether or not we pull from that.
Most people have an emergency fund or something similar to it or miscellaneous savings, but there's not much clarity or understanding of when it's accessible, when to use it, where to put it. There's just a lot of gray area that people have in that area. And I think it's so important for us to have an emergency fund and to be prepared, and it's biblical.
One example in the Bible we have is Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
So Joseph is sold into slavery by his brothers, and he kind of works his way up from getting thrown into prison, works his way up, and now he's kind of in charge of this massive emergency fund operation. So Pharaoh had this dream. Joseph was able to interpret and say, hey, the next 7 years, we're going to have plenty. And then 7 years after that, there's going to be a famine. We have to start setting aside resources so that in the time that we go from having plenty to not enough, we will have a backup of grain and all of these things to be able to get through this hard time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people are, especially in today's culture, is like, enjoy what you have right now. Don't think about the future. And I think it's really easy for us as Americans to just be like, I'm making X amount of dollars, I'm going to spend and focus on that, and not really pay attention to setting money aside, because there are going to be things that are unforeseen that will come up. In fact, 1 out of every 3 Americans are not able to cover a $400 emergency. That's a third of Americans can't cover a $400 emergency. And a $400 emergency is really quite a small emergency. You can't go to the ER doctor for that. Most things cost a lot more than that.
We see a lot of times with our clients that they can't build up this emergency fund because they keep tapping into it. That's where having a savings bucket like defense before you get to the emergency fund is so crucial, because we want to start saving money for those little things that we know are probably going to happen. We know that every 3 months or so, 3 or 4 months, we got to get an oil change. We can't let that be an emergency that, oh, we've got to tap into the emergency fund in order to do this thing that comes every 3 or 4 months. Like start building that out. There is this piece that we need to protect our emergency fund so that it can grow, so that it can be there to protect us.
The sinking funds really do make it so that way you're using your emergency fund for true emergencies and not for things like, oh, I needed new tires, which you can kind of foresee that that's going to be something that's coming up.
Tires are a big thing. Like 5 years ago, we got new tires, but we didn't put anything aside all those 5 years to buy new tires this year that we need it. And that becomes an emergency. So it's a lot of this proactive approach. We don't have an emergency fund so that we can cover things that we know are going to come up. We have an emergency fund so that if something unexpected comes up, you have something there. And even if something comes up that's unexpected, that doesn't mean that jumping right straight into your emergency fund is the first thing. I mean, looking at your savings buckets and other savings, how can you protect that emergency fund so that it is always there? You're going to sleep better with a bigger emergency fund.
We need an emergency fund. And I think COVID really spotlighted this need, that so many people, their lives were just completely changed. And it wasn't anything that any person did. And so some people lost their jobs. They weren't able to work. A lot of things had to shift. And that's when you really do need an emergency fund. You need to have money set aside, because I think most of the time we think of an emergency fund as needed when we lose a job or something like there's a health crisis in your family. We don't typically think about, well, a global pandemic could actually be a reason that we need to have an emergency fund.
It's not a matter of if something is going to come up that you need an emergency fund. It's when something will come up, because it's going to happen. And that's why it's so important to have an emergency fund. What keeps you up at night? What are the things that you're like, if this happens, I will not be prepared for it? Think about that. What would it cost to cover that? And start thinking of a plan and building out a plan that you can now sleep better, because you have this emergency fund set up, and it allows you to not have to worry so much.
I notice a lot with our clients is that typically if it's in a couple, one person really just craves security. They want to have some money set aside just to make them feel like they have breathing room.
Yeah.
The other spouse typically is not really feeling like they need that much buffer.
Yeah. YOLO.
Yes. And so paying attention to your spouse, like if you are the one who feels like, well, I don't really need that much, pay attention to your spouse, because what if you were able to save an amount that would make both parties really feeling safe and comfortable? We still need to trust God through the whole process, but we also need to be prepared. We need to be diligent. We're stewarding God's resources, and that doesn't mean that we're just going to spend every single penny that comes to us. It means that we need to be setting it aside some for the future and being prepared.
For some people, an emergency fund seems like an unwise venture with your money, because it really is money that you're just setting aside. It's not growing. It's just kind of there in case of an emergency. We can't think of emergency funds as an investment tool. It is not. It is an investment in your stress level. That I can say it is. However, it is an insurance policy. Like, you're putting money aside so that in case of an emergency, you have something there. The other thing to consider is, what would having an emergency fund free you up to do? There may be some things that you're like, well, I really feel like I'm supposed to be doing X, but I can't do that because what if Y and Z happen? Then I'm going to kind of be in a place where I can't move forward. Maybe it's a new job that you want, and it's something it pays less, but you know that if you do that, then your tires are going to go out, or you're going to have something happen that you're not going to be able to cover that. What if you were able to create a buffer such that you felt comfortable to do the scary things that you know you're supposed to do, either with your money or with your time or with your family? Like, those are kind of the things that I want you to start considering when you're thinking about putting together an emergency fund.
Yeah, I know for us personally, when we were wanting to start our own business together, we really added a lot more into our emergency fund to give ourselves breathing room, so that way we would have a lane to actually land on.
Yeah.
And not be as stressed about starting something from scratch.
Yeah.
And we would not be able to start our own business, to be able to do all the things that we have been able to do if we didn't have an emergency fund. It has given us the ability to say yes to the things we really feel like God has been putting on our hearts. If we didn't have that, I think we would have stuck with living more in survival mode.
Yeah.
And not, it would have taken us years before we could get to where we are right now.
We could not have stepped into what we felt God was calling us to do had we not had that runway of finances. And we saved up a good year's worth of finances that if we had no income for one full year, we would be okay. And so that freed us up to do the things that we felt we were called to do with that buffer. So it's kind of like trust in God, but also do what you can so that you'll be a wise steward with the finances that you have, and a wise steward with the family that you have, and that you can take care of them. And so it is this kind of back and forth on do what you need to do to make it happen, but also trust in God and lean on Him in terms of what you're going to do in the future.
Yeah. Another really key point when it comes to emergency funds is determining how much to save. And this is a really tricky question because there's not an absolute answer.
One of the biggest pieces of advice out there is 3 to 6 months worth of expenses that you need to save up so that you have enough for your emergency fund. Some go as far as 12 months.
Yeah.
But the thing is it's different for everybody. I mean, you got to look at your job stability. You got to look at, are you renting or you're a homeowner?
If you're a homeowner, I mean, you could need a new roof, and that could be $20,000. That you're going to need to save a lot more than if you are renting. It depends on how many kids you have. If you have a family of 3 versus a family of 7, you're going to need a bigger emergency fund.
Yeah.
Depends on your cost of living. Maybe you live in a place that you don't have a lot of expenses and compared to other places. There's a lot that goes into it. And so I think just saying like 3 to 6 months is not it's a helpful starting place, but it is not the finish line.
Right. Everybody has different levels of health. That some people are going to be spending lots of money on health issues, others are not. That could be something to take into account. We're entrepreneurs, so we have a little bit more of a risky job profession in that money could dry up like that. We could go out and get a new job, yeah. But if you have a job that at any time money could kind of just stop, then that's something that you need to consider as to maybe would be a little bit higher end. Do you have one income or two incomes coming into the household? Those are things to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so one of the things that we do is when we work with our clients is really discovering what their true emergency fund number is that they both feel comfortable with looking at them holistically. And that just is so refreshing for our clients, for them to actually have a true number to go for. And some of them realize they've already they have more than they need in their emergency fund. And then they're able to move those funds into things that really can move the needle in more deliberate ways.
A question that we get a lot is, okay, I know my number. I know how much I want to get to. And there is some anxiety around not knowing how much you need. If you need help with that, get in with us on our one-on-one coaching or jump into Steward Lab and we can help you walk through that, because it is so freeing once you know how much, because it's also giving you an opportunity to know on a monthly basis, how much do I need to be setting aside for my emergency fund? The cool thing is once you hit that emergency fund number, is now you can divert that money that you were putting into the emergency fund towards other goals.
A third thing that you want to think about when you're creating an emergency fund is like, how do I actually do this? The first thing is you want to make sure that it's money that is liquid.
Yeah.
If you put it into a CD, you get penalized for taking the money out early. You want this money to be accessible, but you also don't want it to be so accessible that you have like a debit card attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
You want it to be in a place where you have to put some effort to get it out, but it's also something that is liquid and free for you to be able to use without getting penalized.
Right. And what that can look like is maybe you use a credit union for your day-to-day spending and for your bill pay. Maybe you go and get a completely different bank account in a different bank and you put your emergency fund in there. You don't have a debit card that's attached. And the only way you can get it is by going in, pulling out cash, or transferring it in.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's going to slow you down, because it's so easy to say, oh man, we have this trip coming up. We're short $1,200. I know where $1,200 is. We've got our emergency fund. We just got $2,000 in there. And then you take that $1,200 out and you're just like shooting yourself in the foot.
Mm-hmm.
We have to make it accessible, but not so accessible that it's easy to spend on luxury items.
Yeah, and online banking is another option too, is to use it in an online bank. And for some people, they need that out of sight, out of mind. If you have your emergency fund where you're not looking at it often, you're going to just know that it's there, but you don't have to see that number and then feel tempted. So pay attention to how you interact with money.
Yeah. And every bank that I've ever interacted with, you can change the name of your account. You have to clearly label this. We see this a lot with our clients. One of the biggest mistakes that they make when it comes to their emergency fund is they don't label it emergency fund. It just says savings. Mm-hmm. And for you, as you look at that, if it says emergency fund, you can go through your mind and think, is this an emergency that I'm pulling this money out? If it says savings account or savings 0453 or whatever it is, then you don't have this mental block saying, don't use this for anything but emergencies. Mm-hmm. And so clearly define what the account is used for.
Yeah. And then another thing to do is to automate contributions. It's easy to just say like, oh, I want to be putting $50 in that every month. But it takes intention to actually transfer that money over. But if you can automate those steps, that means you're automating the good behavior that you're wanting to do. And that is something that you can set up and put in that amount that you need. And then once you hit the amount that you need for your emergency fund, then you can, like James was saying, like you can go and move that money to something else. Mm-hmm. And then when you use it, your emergency fund, then refill it. And then that's when you start going back and putting money back into that fund.
So if you're a regular listener of the Steward Lab podcast, you know that each episode we have an experiment. So this is the experiment for you. We want you to start thinking about how much you need for your emergency fund. If you're married, talk with your spouse, sit down and start working through that and figuring out what is your goal amount for the emergency fund.
If you don't have an emergency fund, it's time to start setting one up. So choose where you want to house your emergency fund. It could be in a credit union or online bank or in a bank, wherever you want it to be. Clearly label it and then start putting automatic contributions into that on a monthly basis.
Yeah, if you do have an emergency fund and you find that it's too accessible or it's not clearly labeled, then make adjustments as necessary. If it's not accessible enough, if you have your emergency fund in an investment account that if you pull that out, or a CD and you pull that out and it's going to penalize you, then that's not the appropriate place to have your emergency fund. So make an adjustment there. And then again, create automated contributions to your fund. So just kind of a recap for today. Find out how much you need, figure out where it's going to be, set it up, and then automate those contributions. That is your experiment for this week.
And I think it's just really good to go back and think about how Joseph not only saved the people right there in Egypt and the Israelites, like he saved a whole people group by having an emergency fund, by setting stuff aside when good times are going. Lifestyle creep is real, and it's easy when times are good and you have more income coming in to just inflate your lifestyle, but we need margin. And so living below your means, like Joseph instructed all of Egypt to do, saved lives. It saved an entire nation. And so setting some money aside and having margin, and when you do have an increase in income, don't try to just increase your lifestyle to match that. Like, how can you use that extra to prepare for the future, to set yourself up so that way you are going to feel prepared and confident for what God has for you in the future.
As stewards of God's resources, we shouldn't just try to be prepared for the best of times. We should also be prepared for those times that are hard, for the worst of times. And that's what an emergency fund can do. So be wise stewards with your finances. If you don't already have an emergency fund, start working towards getting one, putting money aside, contributing on an automatic basis. If you do have one, reevaluate. Do you have enough? Do you have too much? And make adjustments as necessary.
If you're wanting support in figuring out what your true emergency fund number is and you want some coaching along the way, we would love to be able to work with you. You can get on a free call with us at richlivingcoaching.com/meet. That's MEET, not MEAT. We would love to be able to help you in the process of becoming a better steward of the resources that you have. Thank you for joining us.
Until next week, continue stewarding God's resources.